What is greed? Of course, none of us are greedy. It's only the other fellow who's greedy. Milton Friedman, American economist. All right. Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, I want to thank you so much for giving me your time so early. Do me a favor, folks. If you enjoy the show, be sure to like and subscribe to my channel. And for the really serious folk out there, hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. All right. So we are going to talk about price gouging again because the topic never seems to get old. I was thinking about it this morning. As a dad, there will be times that I have to tell my son things more than once, right? Because he's just not going. He's going to be resistant to learning it for whatever reason, right? Maybe he doesn't believe me. Maybe it just doesn't seem intuitive to him. It's counterintuitive, and he's like, well, that doesn't even make any sense, Dad. Why would you say that? And so he's got to go and test it, and he'll find out that in many cases I will be right, not because like I'm some super brilliant. No, that probably is right, but for the most part, the real reason will be because I have experience. And that experience has led me to understand things that he has not. And price gouging is like kind of in that same situation. I think it's counterintuitive to many, many people, and they need to be told this over and over and over again. And I think it's incumbent on us, those who are liberty oriented, libertarians, economists, wherever you fall, if you believe that price gouging is in fact not a bad thing, then it's incumbent on us to just keep going at it and then say, all right, what's another way that I can explain this? How can I explain it a different way? How can I use different, just different examples upon different examples? And the more we talk about it and the more ways that we find to talk about it, the more the more unique ways, the different analogies and stories and everything, I think we can lead people to a better understanding. So I will always, like, whenever probably once a year, because like I live in Florida and we have hurricane season, and here in Florida we do have price gouging laws, and it's a big thing. And every time there's a catastrophe, people want to be like, "Oh my God, the price gouging! I can't believe you." And so then there will always be an opportunity for me to talk about it. So I'm 46 now, and if I continue podcasting for the next like 40 years, we're going to be I'm probably going to have to talk about it every year, at least once. And then hopefully through that effort, I will convince more and more people to move away from this idea that price gouging is a bad thing and to a correct position where price gouging is a good thing. So we're going to talk about that really quickly. Good morning, everyone from Time Surfing Alien. Good morning to you. I'm glad that you are here. Let's see. Yes, that Liberty lady says, good morning, Liberty champions. Hit that like on the way in and hit the follow button and hit the bell. Absolutely. Definitely do that for me. All right. So let's get into this. Let me show you a video that I saw. This is going around and it's very interesting now. This video, let me just play the clip and then I'll talk about this video real quickly here.
I know. One more time. How much a gallon? That's all I want to hear.
That's all I want to hear.
Why are you taking a video? How much is it a gallon? You work here?
He's taking a video.
How much is it a gallon? That's all we want to know. You're filling gas, right? How much a gallon? $10. $10 a gallon. Yeah. Okay.
Video me, okay? Video me, okay? All right, so there it is. He posts that this is Pope's grocery store, in his video because, he just wants to know how much are you charging, And a lot of the people, it's interesting that a lot of the comments on that video were kind of racist. And I don't use that word like anybody that knows me knows that I am not quick to say the word racist. But I think some of you were, because people were like, "Oh, that's these immigrants, they don't care about us. They're just here to make a buck." Okay. Why do you go to work? Do you go to work because you just feel good about doing a nice thing for the employer that you're working for? You're like, man, do you go to big box store to work, or, big corporation out of your goodness of your heart? No, you go there to make a buck. If you sell something at your, like let's say that your neighborhood is having a garage sale day, and you decide to dig out a bunch of stuff and put it out there and mark up all the prices and everything. Are you doing that just because you're like, man, I would love for someone else to have this fish aquarium? No, you're doing it to make a buck. Everybody, this is the whole point of the quote at the beginning of the show. We're all greedy. We all want to make a buck. Now, yeah, sometimes we do things out of the generosity, just to be generous. Sometimes I take things over to Goodwill and I just drop them off and I say, here you go. If you can make $1 and somebody else can have it, great. It's fine. Get it out of my house. But I would argue that there was still some greed in a sense there, because I want to feel good about myself. Maybe I didn't want to make $1, but maybe I wanted to feel good, like, hey, I donated this thing. Right. So now I feel good about myself. Also, I feel good about myself for having cleaned my house out. So I think that there's always a self-interest. That's a conversation. That's a different conversation for another day. But I just want to point out that, going back to that video, there were a lot of comments along that line. And one of the interesting things about the video that probably didn't get a lot of attention, if you notice, there were like a bunch of people standing around to get gas. And there was one guy, it appears, just from what we could tell, that was taking a video. One guy. One guy was concerned about how much that I don't know that he was there to buy gas. Everybody else was. That was kind of interesting. Like, out of all those people, and all the comments that I saw about how greedy these people are, those people are, all these comments, like, I don't know, the people that were there getting gas seemed to be fine with it. It was this one dude that showed up to get his moment of fame, and he got it, right? Like, that video had like 2.3 million views, over 6,000 likes, 1,000 retweet quote tweets, 1,000 comments. Like those are the details. Like, yeah, it went around. It kind of got popular. But I think there's some misconceptions. Again, number one being that, why is it that the person that was the only person that we see in there taking a video, that was the person that seemed to be concerned about price gouging? Everybody else just wanted the damn gas. Go figure. All right, so here, let me show you something, because I have I have some definitions. Because before we can talk about price gouging, let's get some definitions out the way. Um, and so let's see here. Where do I did I is that what I wanted to go? Oh, you know what? Before that, let's show some other sentiments, just general sentiments about price gouging, and then we'll then we'll talk about definitions. So let's see here. There we go. All right, perfect. So let me see here. Let me get this on the screen so I can read it. So, all right. Here's one guy. He says, in a truly free market, price gougers would be tarred and feathered and ridden out of town on a rail. Remember this when some Lobert lectures you about the need for price gouging during an emergency. So I'll be that Lobert, and I'm going to lecture you, and you're going to be more informed when you leave this show. All right, what else we got here? Who else had something to say? This is truth. I wonder if all these nerds on Twitter making their smug econ 101 arguments have ever been in a chaotic disaster area, rolled into the gas station to find $10 gas. Probably lands a bit different. I kind of agree. It does land a little different, right? Talking about it and then going and experiencing it. Yeah, it lands differently. That doesn't make it untrue, but I mean, okay, yeah, it does feel different when I go to the store and I actually have to make a decision. Do I want to pay this price? Right. But that doesn't change whether or not I think it's a good and moral thing. That just means that it felt different. Okay. So what? I don't operate on my feelings. Right. All right. Here's a good one. This is the same Pope. See, Pope's grocery store they got a lot of attention over this. This is a gas station in Augusta, Georgia, charging $10 a gallon for gas. Price gouging is a felony. If you are near here, please do not give these people your money. That's this is funny. I want you to think about this person right here. They're asking people to not give like if if I'm willing to give my $10 for that gallon or however much that I buy, wouldn't that kind of suggest that I'm okay with the $10 a gallon? Like on some level? Like not that I like it, not that I wouldn't rather pay less. I would always rather pay less. I go to the gas station now and I would rather pay less. Right? There is never a time when I go somewhere and I wouldn't want to pay less. Never. Never ever. Why? Because we're all greedy on some level. So that one was funny. What else we got in here? Let's make these scumbag price gouging a-holes famous. Pope's grocery store in Augusta, Georgia, charging hurricane victim $10 a gallon for gasoline. I'm telling you, these people, like a lot of people were angry about these folk, right? These they look like they're Indian, I think. I think they were Indian. Man, those Indians, they just come over here and they just want to price gouge us. The government never does that through their taxes. Another conversation for a different day. All right, so let's see what else we got. Ha 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 ha. Right, and this is from the Atlantic. Here's the title: Sometimes you just have to ignore the economist. Kamala Harris's proposed price gouging ban might irritate academics, but it makes sense to everyone else. You know what's funny about that? During the pandemic, what did we hear? Trust the experts. Anytime I tried to chime in, people are like, "Oh, are you an epidemiologist?" No, I'm a guy that reads. You shut up. You're not an epidemiologist. You're not a virologist. You're not a policymaker. You're not a this. All of a sudden, now we don't trust the experts, right? The real experts, the guys that like do this for a living and get rigorously peer reviewed by other guys that do it for a living. No, we're not supposed to check those guys, and we're not supposed to, listen to those guys. We just ignore them because we know better. It's intuitive to us. All right. I love these. The Libertarian Party of Tennessee, you guys are great. Price gouging during a disaster keeps people from hoarding. And then this guy says, go boil your balls, please. He then went on later to say, I don't think you're a good person for trying to justify the price gouging as, quote, supply and demand, end quote. So I really couldn't care less. At least he used couldn't care less correctly. Someday you'll wake up and realize I was objectively right, but part of me doubts that. You're right. I won't, because I'm right and you are wrong. And I will demonstrate that here in just a few minutes. All right, let's see. We got a couple more. Um, Bumping the gas price up by 3 times the amount in the middle of a pandemic is price gouging. Might be. We'll talk about the definition in a minute. Nothing to do with economics/monopoly. Okay. That I could wax on for like 5 minutes on that statement alone, combining economics and monopoly, as if those are like side by side terms. Anyway, that's a different point. It's about selfish greed and not giving a crap about people. We'll find out in just a few minutes. Let's see, a couple more here. I promise you. If you really care, increase minimum wage, strengthen unions, tax the rich their fair share to implement UBI, Green New Deal, strong welfare programs with quality free food, housing, healthcare, and education, make laws against greed, price gouging and bigotry, and end the genocide in Gaza. Okay, make laws against greed? Oh, so like when I go to the store and I want to pay less for something, or better yet, when I go to a market, like a fair or something like that, where people have a table and then I can actually negotiate price. You can't negotiate a price at the grocery store, but you can negotiate a price at like a fair or, some kind of pop-up market, right? And if I negotiate, I'm being greedy, right? And should there be a law against that? Should I be punished for saying, you know what? I think you are charging too much for this fish tank here at the market or at your garage sale. And I would rather you sell it to me for cheaper. And should that person call up the police and go, we got a greedy guy. We got laws against that. Get him. Like, I don't think people understand what they're talking about. They really don't. Here's the last one. But the landlords are jacking up housing prices because of increased demand. The migrants aren't the issue. It's the price gouging and the greed of unregulated investors and landlords that are the key reason for affordability going out the window. Okay. Yeah, it's just greed, right? It's just price gouging and greed. Never mind that people might actually be willing to pay for this kind of stuff, right? It's just the greed and the price gouging. All right, so let's look at some definitions here really quickly, and let's see if we can make some sense. Get some definitions, and then we'll see where we can go with this. So here's from Merriam-Webster. This was actually like I was kind of disappointed here because this is like of all definitions, this seems to be the absolute laziest definition. Like, did did a middle schooler provide this definition to Merriam-Webster? Like, I used to have a lot of I had a high regard for Merriam-Webster because I used to go to them and get some good definitions. And now this is it just says charging customers too much money. What does that even mean? Who decides what is too much money? When is it too much money? If I go to buy a candy bar and they want to sell it for $3 and I only have $2.50, are they price gouging me for charging me too much because I didn't have $3? Like, what is it? Like, this is the this is the worst definition I've probably ever seen for price gouging. I think people on the internet that I disagree with could put together a better definition. Let's see. Then we've got from dictionary.com. This one's a little better. An act or instance of charging customers too high a price for goods or services, especially when demand is high and supplies are limited. Okay, so now it's a little bit more fleshed out, but they still have this ambiguous too high, right? Like, when is it too high? I mean, this is basically a little bit longer version of what we just read. And then we get here. This comes from Harvard Business School. Like, surely Harvard Business School is going to have a good definition, right? Price gouging occurs when companies raise prices to unfair levels. There's no rule for what qualifies as price gouging, but it's not an uncommon occurrence. Like, I feel like they just undermined their own definition there. They're like, well, it's an unfair level. There's really no rule for what qualifies. Okay, so there's no rule for what qualifies, so we can't even determine when it happens. But we know that it's kind of like that, that whole definition of porn. Like, I know it when I see it, or not porn, but when something's offensive or something like that. Like, I just know it when I see it. Like, for example, EpiPen cost and Uber price surges are both examples of price increases that have been considered unfair. Okay, so like somebody considers it. Well, somebody always considers it unfair. That's why they don't buy things. Like, if again, to the little fish tank analogy, if I go to your garage sale and you're selling a fish tank for, I don't know, $100, I might think that's an unfair price. And so I may not buy it. Right. And is that price gouging? Or is it like, am I correct? Because I'm the customer. Like, and I know for sure what that cost or should cost, or well, I know what the price should be. We have to be careful about using the word cost and price. I'm not going to get into that today. I think I've gotten into that in the past, but like, so again, these definitions are very vague, and they always include what is unfair, not fair, too high, but these are ambiguous phrases. Like, I don't know what they mean. I don't know how to properly apply them. I don't know how to say in one instance price gouging, in another instance no, it's not price gouging based on those definitions. I can't do it, and so they've kind of rendered it meaningless. But I think I can do it. I think I can define price gouging, right? And I think I can do it fairly. So let's see if my definition works. This is the Liberty Dad. This is the official Liberty Dad definition. An act or instance of sharply increasing prices in order to regulate supply when demand exceeds available resources of a product. So, like, that's it. Just no morality into it. Just a simple definition. I mean, let me like, what do you think, guys? Like, did I hit that right? Is that pretty decent? I mean, somebody could argue it, obviously. I mean, we can always argue anything. But the real question is, how did I do? Let me look at the comments. Let's see. See. Nobody's yelling at me yet. Nobody's like, man, you moron. That's a terrible definition. So I'm going to go and say, like, it's probably a pretty decent one, but that's the one I'm going to defend today. Okay. So, an act or instance of sharply increasing prices in order to regulate supply when demand exceeds available resources of a product. That's it. So we're gonna see if I can't defend that here in a few moments. Before we do that, let's go to an intermission, and then we'll be right back, and we're gonna dive right into it. So see you in just a moment.
Yeah. Well, I'm originally from West Virginia. I was born in Ohio, been raised in West Virginia the majority of my life. I was convinced, like a lot of people in West Virginia, that I was going to grow up and go somewhere and do bigger and better things. So I went to West Virginia Wesleyan here in Buchanan, and I left after that and went to the University of Akron School of Law in Ohio. Didn't really take long for me living outside of West Virginia to know I wanted to come back. So I came back here to Buchanan in 2010 with my husband, Carl, who was originally from Cleveland. And this is where we've raised our daughter, Iris. Iris is 19. She's a sophomore at Wesleyan. I started my own law practice here in West Virginia. I have around 10 employees. I come from a long line of small business owners. My parents have always had small businesses. That's what I grew up with, and that's what I've come to know. In my personal life, I'm very different than in my business life. In my business life, I'm very serious because I have to be. In my personal life, I'm pretty laid back. I stay pretty active. I go to the gym every day. I work out all the time. I spend almost every waking hour I have that I'm not at work volunteering for different community organizations. Small towns are my passion, I guess. They really mean a lot to me. So I spend a lot of time here in my small town, devoting my time to different organizations. For as long as I can remember, we've been here in West Virginia on the top of every bad list and the bottom of every good list. We've been told since we were children, you have to leave the state. There's nothing for you here. There's no jobs for you here. We're told there's no culture here. There's no art here. There's no diversity here. We have been indoctrinated to think that we need to get all these things, jobs, culture, either by leaving or somehow importing them. And that is not true. We have to change the narrative to make people understand everything that we need to succeed is already here in West Virginia. Everything that we need to have an economy like no other is here in West Virginia. Everything that we need to keep young people here and to create cultural opportunity is here in West Virginia. Everything that we need to live life the way that we know how is here in West Virginia. We just need the right person to harness that and introduce us to our opportunities. You can continue to vote the same way and get the same results. You can continue to do the same things and not get new solutions. Or you can do something different. If you want change, if you want new solutions, if you want West Virginia to move forward, you have to do something different. Voting Libertarian this year is your opportunity to do something different. It's your opportunity to vote with your conscience. It's your opportunity to say, I'm done with the same thing happening over and over and over again, and I'm ready for something new. I'm ready for change. I offer you the opportunity for that change.
All right. So we are back, and a couple comments came in because, I was a bit quick there, and let's see what they said about my definition. That Liberty Lady said, that's a good definition. And then Time Surfing Alien says, better definition than the others. So my audience is like, all right, man, that's pretty fair. That's not a bad definition. All right. So that's the one we're going to work with. We'll see if I can kind of demonstrate some truth to that definition. So before we get into that, I want to, as part of getting into that, I want to play this video. This is an old video. It's from John Stossel. If you don't watch John Stossel videos, you really should. But I think my audience probably has seen their fair share of John Stossel videos. And this is actually an old one, and I'm going to be referencing some of the things from this video as we go through discussing price gouging. So let me play this video, and I'll probably stop and make some commentary here and there. And then, we're really going to dive in. And I've got an illustration that I think is going to be extremely unique and valuable. So here we go.
Is price gouging evil? Everyone agrees that if a seller greedily doubles prices after, say, a hurricane, that's not only bad, it's immoral. People say that when gas prices are raised.
They're taking advantage of us. I think we're being ripped off.
We are being hosed here, and the oil fat cats are lapping up the dollar.
Crazy that Bill O'Reilly, like supposedly an educated guy and, a dude that's like on the right and all that. It's wild that he would say that, but whatever. I mean, smart people say dumb things.
Gouging at its best. But what exactly is gouging? People say it's raising prices too much, but who exactly gets to decide what's too much?
I don't know.
For people to take advantage of those in need violates every biblical standard of morals that I'm aware of.
Mississippi's Attorney General announced a crackdown on gougers after Hurricane Katrina.
Massive destruction everywhere.
One gouger who was arrested was John Shepperson. He and his family live in Kentucky. They watched news reports about Katrina and learned people desperately needed things.
My wife just got out of the hospital, and she's very sick, and we need a generator.
John thought he could help and make some money too, so he bought 19 generators, and he and his family then rented a U-Haul and drove it 600 miles to this part of Mississippi, which had no power at the time.
5 million people in this region are without power.
John offered to sell his generators for twice what he paid for them, and people were eager to buy.
Okay, that's a very important thing. Just like the video of Pope's gas station, people were eager to buy, right? Like people wanted to buy this. That's going to be very, very important in just a moment when we walk through this and give you the most basic, simple illustration of how this all works.
People were excited. We had a product they needed.
But instead, police confiscated his generators, and John was locked up in this jail for price gouging.
They arrested me, and I just could not believe that I was being arrested.
Authorities held him 4 days, and his generators are still in police custody.
And then nobody got any use out of them. They were useless.
So imagine that. This guy, I can't remember his name. He goes from, he's in Kentucky. He goes down with 19 generators that he paid for. Do you know how much a generator cost? Like, this is not like a $5 item. He's paid he's paid thousands of dollars for almost 20 generators, right? And then he rented a U-Haul, so he had to pay for that. Then he had to pay for gas. He had to stop everything that he was doing, whatever that was, right? Maybe he had a week off and he was going to spend time with his family. Now he's no longer spending time with his family. Maybe he just had to take off from work, use some of his PTO. I don't know, whatever he had to do. But whatever he was doing is now set aside. And he drives down. People wanted to buy these. They wanted to buy them. And then he gets arrested and put in jail for 4 days. And then I believe, this is Hurricane Katrina, I believe long after that, nobody ever got the generators. Nobody. Like the police didn't even give them out. Nothing. The police kept them.
So did the public benefit? The real question is, what's the best way to deal with shortages after a disaster?
Anybody, what do we need? Come on, guys. Generators. Food.
Anytime there's a natural disaster, a hurricane, an earthquake, the price of the things that people desperately want to have, batteries, flashlights, generators, water, milk, they go up or they disappear.
Economist Russ Roberts points out that after the disaster, if sellers don't raise prices, supplies vanish. Anxious buyers line up and often buy more than they need.
They buy more than they need just in case. Why? Because people don't know what's going to happen. This is like the Costco story that I told a long time ago when my wife and I showed up about 45 minutes early to Costco. We were going to buy some water and we got there a little too early. The parking lot was empty. We said, okay, we'll go run some errands. We come back about 45 minutes late. So like I think they opened at 10. We got there at like 10:45 and the parking lot is packed full. Couldn't even find a spot. I dropped my wife off at the door. As I dropped her off, there was a guy pushing a cart out in front of me and it's piled high full of bottles of water. Now, I don't know what his needs were, but just by looking at it, it seemed like maybe he overbought. And I lamented to my wife. I said, we're going to get in there and there's not going to be any water. And I was annoyed. We ended up being fine. Don't worry. We can take care of ourselves. We just happened to be out and thought, we'll get some extra water just in case. We were also the just in case people. We just weren't like 14 cases just in case. We were like one case. We'll take one case just in case we need it. We'll be fine otherwise. Right. And when she got in and when I finally parked and I walked in, they told me, they said, we're out of water. Go figure. As I like to tell people, paying double for a bottle of water is better than the price remaining the same and getting 0 bottles, right? Because it doesn't matter how cheap it is. If I don't get any, who cares how cheap it was? Let's continue.
Just in case those not at the front of the line may get nothing.
Right. Right. Think about that for a moment. We got there at 10:45, 45 minutes after they opened. Now, and we just happened to be in a situation where we were able to go at that time. What about the person that had to get up and go to work and they weren't going to get an opportunity to go to the store until, I don't know, 4 or 5 o'clock? Well, that water's long gone. Oops, did I stop it? Oops, I didn't mean to stop it. Hold on.
His price.
Let's go back. Let's see here. Sorry about this. I accidentally stopped the video right about there.
What do we need? Come on, guys. Generators. Food.
Anytime there's a natural disaster, a hurricane, an earthquake, the price of the things that people desperately want to have, batteries, flashlights, generators, water, milk, they go up or they disappear.
Economist Russ Roberts points out that after the disaster, if sellers don't raise prices, supplies vanish. Anxious buyers line up and often buy more than they need just in case. Those not at the front of the line may get nothing.
More people want to buy it than there is stuff available. So what do you do? How do you solve that problem? How do you find out who should get those scarce items?
A major energy crisis.
During the last energy crisis, the politician's solution was to cap prices. But that didn't fix the problem. It made it worse.
It was a disaster. It led to long lines and you couldn't get gasoline.
That's why today's high oil profits, says Roberts, are a good thing, because they're a huge incentive to oil companies to look for more oil. You want them to make these monster profits?
I do. Higher prices are hard on consumers. Hard on consumers today, good for consumers tomorrow when those high prices give energy companies the incentive to go discover and refine more energy in the future.
Which is why what the politicians call gouging is actually good. Now, I know you don't believe that.
That's absurd. It's absurd. Prove it. I mean, prove it. I don't know what Mr. Stossel is thinking.
Okay, you probably won't believe me or economist Roberts, but would you believe 3 Nobel Prize-winning economists, all of whom say gouging is good and the best way to get supplies to people who need them most?
There is the best way to do that, and that's a good thing. The gougers deserve a medal.
Because the higher prices bring in the goods that people desperately need.
We don't let the price rise. There aren't going to be enough generators to go around. If we let the price rise, we give people an incentive to bring them in.
Somebody needs to bring these products to people when there are disasters and emergencies. And this is going to be one person that's not going to be there that they took out of the equation.
Yep.
Economists we talk to say he's a hero.
Okay. I want you to listen to this. I think that was the AG for Alabama that he's talking to. Listen to his answer, right? So John Stossel pushes back and says, hey, the economists say these guys are heroes. Here's his answer.
You're the one who's immoral for saying he can't sell generators to people who want willingly to pay for them.
Look, my job is to enforce the law. Our laws state that you cannot increase your profits once a state of emergency has been declared.
So that's not an answer. Okay, folks? If a lawmaker says it's immoral, if that's his first argument, and then you say, well, the experts, the people that study this for a living, the people that rigorously have their ideas tested among other economists, several economists who got Nobel Prizes for their work, are widely regarded as very, top level economists. They say otherwise. And then then the guy goes, well, this is the law is the law. This is what the law says. Okay, but you didn't defend why you said it was immoral. They were able to defend why they said it's not. Milton Friedman absolutely could have defended why he believes that price gougers should get a medal. He wouldn't just say, oh, because of the law, or, oh, because I read it in a book. He's going to demonstrate and show it to you and say, this is exactly why. But that lawmaker, the guy who's punishing people, could not do this. Throw him out. And in a minute here, in just a moment, I'm going to do my best to demonstrate, because that's what we do on the show. We take on the hard stuff.
I want to live in a world where love is what motivates people to help others, and love does that. But there isn't enough love to go around. Love for strangers isn't going to motivate enough people to get in their trucks, load them up with generators, and take them down to help people who are cold and hungry.
All right, so that's the end of that. So now let's get into this, because I think I can work this out and hopefully give a good demonstration of how my definition works and why price gouging is a good thing. So the first thing that we have to understand is what is a transaction? Let's make and I'm going to go through this very quickly. Okay, I have my son's Rubik's Cube here. Okay, let's say that I want to sell it to you for $5. Now my price, it sends a signal. It tells you something. It tells you that I would rather have your $5 than this cube. That's what my price is telling you. Now, if you agree, then you are confirming that you would rather have my cube more than you want your $5. And if we make this transaction, we both feel better off, because we believe that we were better off with the other thing, whatever that is, than we were with what we had. In this particular case, it would be a cube versus money. But it could be, I want to give you this cube if you give me a gallon of milk. And if you say, you know what, I would rather have the cube than the gallon of milk, and I say, I would rather have your gallon of milk than this cube, then we both have made a transaction where we both feel better off. That's how it works. Now, you might say, well, DL, $5, I'm not willing to pay that. And so you might try to negotiate, right? This could be at a yard sale. You might say, nah, I don't know about $5. Will you take $4? Right. And then now we start over that cycle of determining where we both can find this equilibrium moment where we both feel better off. Now, if I agree, and if I say, you know what, $4, that's fine, and then I sell it to you, you give me $4, I give you the cube, we're in the same situation. We both feel that we are better off having the other item than we were with our own. And it can go in any number of ways. You could say, well, I'd rather not pay you $5, but I have this, I don't know, I have a record collection of 3 records. Would you take my records in trade for that? And I might go, you know what? I never thought about that. What records do you got? And then you might show me your records, and I might go, I actually kind of would like those records. And so then I might make this trade. Again, same concept applies. We make this transaction because I feel better off having your records than I do having my cube. You feel better off having the cube than you do having my records. That's how every transaction works, no matter what, 100% of the time. All right. Either we come to an agreement or we don't. If we do come to an agreement, again, that means we would rather have what the other person is offering than what we have. And if there is no agreement, that means one or both of us do not feel better off with the other item. Again, whatever that is, whatever that is. The same applies during times of crisis. It just might feel a little bit differently. It might hit differently, but it's the same concept. Now, where people get tripped up is that demand exceeds availability of a desired item: water, food, gas, etc. So then we have to figure out, how do we ration this? Because there isn't enough to go around. I want you to think about something. If you go to the gas station right now and you're not in a disaster zone, you're just, you're somewhere where nothing serious has happened, everything is exactly normal the way it has been. If you go to get gas right now, it's almost a guarantee that there's more gas than you can buy. Period. Same thing if you go to the store and you're like, you know what? I want to buy some Oreos. You're going to go in. The likelihood is pretty high that there's going to be more Oreos than you either can buy or want to buy. Okay? Keep that in mind. But all this, so it's the reverse of a crisis. There's more than you need. But in a crisis, there's less than you need or want. Because you might go in there and you might say, well, I would like 2 cases of bottled water, but there's only, 1 case for me to have, right? Like that might happen. So it's the reverse. That's all that a crisis is. We're flipping the table. All right. So how do we ration this? Well, I would argue that price best rations and does it in one fell swoop. So some of the arguments that people like to make is they say, well, what if we just limit quantity? We'll put a limit on there, right? But we get around those limits all the time. Like most everybody has either done it or knows how it works. So imagine you go to the store and you see there's some bread. And I see this all the time. I go in there and I see, oh, there's bread and or something, and it's a BOGO, buy one get one, or it's some other deal, right? But it's not the typical price. Buy one get two, buy two get one, whatever. Buy one get another one for 50% off. Any kind of a deal. It's a deal where now I would effectively be paying less than I normally would. What do? Well, if it's an item that I want, that I like, then I buy it. Now, if you've ever seen at the bottom of the little tag, it'll say limit supply. They have a limit. So let's say that I really, really like an item and it's a really good deal. Well, there's going to be a limit on how many I can buy. So what do? Well, if I'm with my wife, I might say, hey, you go get in that line with these and I'll get in this line with these. Right. And we get around this limit because we're paying less, or in the case of an emergency, we might be paying the same amount, but the price is not holding us back. The only thing that's holding us back is limits, and we find a way around them. Or if I'm by myself, I go in and I buy the limit that I can buy, and then maybe I come back later and then I buy some more. So I get around the limits. That happens. So what would they have to do? So now you have an emergency, and then we don't want to price gouge. So we put a limit. We say you can only buy 1 case of water per family, per household, per transaction, whatever the case is. So all we do is my wife and I split up into different lanes, or my wife, and if I have a teenage son, my wife, my son, and I all split up in different lanes. We all take a little bit of money, and the same amount of money that the whole family unit gets to have, right? Like the same amount that we have, and we just split up and we go and we get around the limits. Very easy. Or I could go to another store. If it's an emergency, then maybe everybody has limits. So I just go to Publix, and then I go to some other store. I go to trying to think of the other stores, Costco, whatever. So I go to different stores and I purchase, and the stores are none the wiser. They can't stop me. So the only way to stop me would be to implement some sort of system that would check and make sure that I hadn't previously purchased them. Well, that's a costly system, and that's going to be very difficult. But again, we're adding another layer in order to make sure that we ration a limited supply of something. And I'm arguing that price best rations it. Price also incentivizes more product to come when there is a problem. So remember the generator guy. People were willing to pay for generators, just like you might be willing to pay for my Rubik's Cube. They felt better off with the generator than the money that he was asking them to pay. I didn't look up the cost of a generator, but let's say a generator cost $500. Okay. And let's say that he went and he bought 19 of them for $500. And then now he wants to sell them for double. So he wants to sell them for $1,000 each. And if I'm in a disaster zone and I'm willing to pay that $1,000, then guess what? I feel better off with that generator than my $1,000. And just to point out on the side, you never know what I can do with that generator, right? I might be able to supply some energy to me and my family, and then maybe benefit my neighbors, right? I might call up my neighbors and say, hey, I've got a generator. You don't have any power at your house. I've got a little bit of power. Why don't you come over here and get some AC, right? So it's not even that my $1,000 is only benefiting me that this man is getting. It may benefit my neighbors who didn't pay anything. So what about the argument that all the wealthy people will just simply buy it and all the poor people will be left out? Well, again, price incentivizes more product. So let's walk through a contrived example of how that might work. So let's say there's 1,000 people in an area. and there's a disaster and nobody has water. And the local store, there's one store. Again, this is contrived, and we're using some numbers just to illustrate a point. So there's 1,000 people. There's one store. They happen to have 500 bottles of water that they normally sell for $1 each. So let's say now the price is quadrupled, and they could quadruple this price for any reason they want. Maybe the store owners are Indian and they came all the way to America just to wait for a disaster so that they could price gouge these poor American people, right? Let's just say that's the story, because that's what a lot of people apparently believe. Okay, so we're gonna operate under that pretense. Okay, they were just waiting. They couldn't wait. They were like Jews with dots on their heads. Okay, that's what people believe. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, okay, I'm gonna go with that. We're gonna work with the example of what people out there believe. So we have 1,000 people, 500 bottles of water that are normally sold for $1 each. The store owner says, you know what? I'm jumping these prices up because, man, this is my opportunity to make a quick buck. So now they say $4 each. So let's say that 500 of those 1,000 people are willing to pay $4 and they each buy one bottle. Okay. So we have 500 people now that have one bottle of water. The other 500 people, they don't have that kind of money. So they don't buy any water. They're still out. So someone somewhere else decides to stop everything they're doing and they just randomly buy 1,000 bottles of water. Why did they pick 1,000? Because in the real world, they have no idea how many people are here that are without and how much they need. They don't know what those families consist of. They don't know how many families are 1 or 2 or 3 or 6 people. They have no idea. They just know there's a shortage of water. I'm buying a bunch. I'm going to take it down. So they buy 1,000 bottles of water, and where they're buying it from, which is not a disaster zone, also sells the bottles for $1 each. So they spend $1,000, they buy 1,000 bottles of water, they load it up, and they bring it down, and they decide to match the same price that these terrible Indians have chosen to charge, $4. So now this is an American, right? So now this American is price gouging other Americans. So 1,000 bottles of water come into this town. They want to sell it for $4. Well, remember, 500 of those people didn't have the $4. So they're out of the equation. So out of that first 500, who were people that had more money, let's say that, well, half of them decided, no, we don't need that water. Like, we're good. We got a bottle of water. So the other half say, well, we'd kind of like a little extra. So 250 of the first 500 people, they decide, I'll pay an additional $4. Because remember, all the water has been bought out now. So now we have the remaining 750 people either won't or cannot pay that, because you had 250 from the rich folk, if you will, who refused to. They already bought a bottle of water. They're good. And you still have 500 people that are without water, right? And that's the argument. The argument is, what about those 500 people? Well, let's continue on and see how this plays out. The seller now, this new seller who's come from out of town, they have 750 bottles of water remaining. Well, he doesn't want to go home with this 750 bottles of water because water's not in demand where he came from. So it's going to be hard for him to sell it back to anybody. He can't do anything with it. So he's got to figure out what to do with it. Because if he goes back, he's got to compete with other people who are selling it for $1. And he bought 1,000 bottles and spent all his time and money, bought gas, whatever he had to do to come out here. That's right. So he spent $1,000 and he spent cost that it took to get the bottles to this disaster area. So he decides, I'm going to lower the price to $3. Okay, great. Now, the remaining 250 people who are on the rich side of the 500, right? 250 people, they initially said, we don't want to pay $4 a bottle. But now they're looking at the $3 and they're like, well, maybe just in case. We don't know how long this is going to last. So they each buy one bottle for $3. So now the seller has 500 bottles of water remaining. And there are 500 poor people who still have no water, right? That's the problem. Now, 500 wealthier people, they have their water. They've been satisfied. They're good to go, right? They've bought the water that they feel is necessary to get them through this disaster. We still have 500 people that have no water. And we have a seller who has 500 bottles of water that he has to offload in some way. Because if he doesn't offload them, again, he's going to go back and he's going to have the cost of traveling down and the cost of traveling back. And then he's got to figure out what to do with this 500 bottles of water. And he doesn't want 500 bottles of water. And it's going to be hard to sell them because all the stores over there are selling them for $1 a bottle. And that's what he paid for it. So his choice is to sell them at cost or figure out what to do with it. So now he decides, I guess I will lower the price. I will lower the price to $2 a bottle. So it's still more, it's double. It's double. So now let's say 250 of the poor people are desperate enough, they pay $2. So they pay for they've got their bottle now. So now they're not out. They had to pay double. They didn't pay quadruple. They paid double, right? Because the seller has to make decisions. And then the seller now has 250 bottles of water left. And there happen to be 250 people who still have not purchased any water because they can't afford more than $1 a bottle. So what does the seller do? Well, now he can take the water back, or he can just say, to heck with it. I've made a bunch of money. So I'm going to go ahead and drop the price to $1 because I'd rather not carry it back and have to deal with it because I don't know if people will even buy it from me. But I do know there are people here that want to buy this water. So he has a guarantee that people will buy the water where he is. Even though he would rather have sold it all for $4, he has to do something with it. And he has to operate on what he can guarantee. So he finally begrudgingly says, I'm going to lower the bottles to $1 a piece, $1 a piece. And then the remaining 250 poor people buy it back, buy that bottle of water. Now, everybody has purchased water. So the big question is, well, how much did he make? Well, on the first 250 bottles, he sold them for $4. On the second 250, he sold them for $3. On the third, he sold them for $2. On the fourth, he sold them for $1. He made $2,500, but he invested only $1. I'm sorry, $1,000, $1 per bottle. Okay. So the cost to buy them was $1,000. So he made so far $1,500, but he has to pay for his gas. He might have had to pay for some food to buy, so that he could eat, because maybe he came down and he spent 3 or 4 days negotiating and working out these deals. So he had to eat or buy some food or bring some food with him, right? In some way, he had to make sure that he ate. Maybe he needed lodging or something, right? So there's cost. So he has to offset his cost. So let's say that he offset his cost. Let's just say $500. So $1,000, he bought the bottles of water. Then he had cost of $500. He made $1,000. He can go home and he feels good. He price gouged everybody. But guess what? Everybody got water. And here's the part that people miss. Yes, wealthy people can buy more stuff. They will always be able to buy more stuff. It doesn't matter what you do. If you keep the price at $1 a bottle, a wealthy person who is willing to pay $4 per bottle can do what? They can buy 4 bottles of water. And if they can, they might, which means it's going to lower the number of bottles of water for everyone. But when the price goes up, when there's gouging, then they have to make decisions. And they have to say, okay, I might have been willing to buy 4 bottles for $1 each, but now the bottles are $4. So do I want to pay $16 for that same 4 bottles? And they're going to make some decisions. But as they make decisions, other people have to make decisions as well. The seller has to make decisions along the way and decide, what do I want to do? Do I want to just sit here and sell them for $4 and just be a greedy SOB? And if people don't get water, they don't get water. Well, if they don't get water and people aren't buying it, then he's not making money. And we haven't even factored in that somebody from some third town might have also had the idea to buy a bunch of water and come in. And so now that person comes in And now you might have two sellers. And these two sellers are now competing to get their bottles of water sold and make sure that they at least break even, if not make some money. These are the decisions that happen. It's a contrived example for sure. But at the end of the day, everybody is making decisions. And these decisions, when you allow price gouging, they allow more inventory, if you will, more of a product to come in at a quicker rate. And if it's because of greed, then good, because it makes it quicker. If remember, we're going back to this contrived scenario based upon the video that people were posting and how they were like, oh, these immigrants are coming in and they're just price gouging us and they're taking advantage of us. Okay, maybe that was the case. But guess what? Through their greed, the shortage of water is shortened. The duration of that shortage is shortened. Is that not a good thing? Or would you rather have a shortage for 1 week or 3 weeks? Well, when you allow people to be greedy and serve their self-interest, then you shorten that duration. So if it's water, which is needed for survival, the human body can go about 3 days without water. And if there's a shortage for a week, then fewer people are harmed than if there's a shortage for 2 or 3 weeks. And so you want to incentivize people to come in. But greed is not the end of the story, because everybody is greedy. The people that are buying it are greedy. The wealthy people are greedy. They don't want to spend $16 to buy 4 bottles when maybe they only need 1 bottle. So they might say, you know what? Now that you're charging $4, I can afford the $4 for 1 bottle. So I'm going to buy just 1 bottle because I'm pretty certain that this will get me through. And so they temper what they're willing to pay based on the price. And guess what? No additional mechanisms are needed. Unlike when we say, hey, let's impose a limit. Well, imposing a limit means that if I can find a way around it, I can and I will, and then I do. This is a good thing. It is a good thing when we price gouge because it helps to level out the supply and the demand. And in this particular case of a disaster, the supply is the one that needs to be brought up. And as that gets brought up, the demand will go down eventually. And the quicker it's brought up, the more quickly the demand will go down. Because eventually, the people that are wealthy, they will come to a point where they say, I'm done buying whatever it is that I'm wanting. And then the price will start to go down. Because now we get to the people that have a little bit, the wealthy people have a lot of money. Then you might have people that have a medium amount of money. And then you get to the people that have a very low amount of money. And as that trickles down, I hate to use that word, but as that goes down, right, people start getting their needs met. This is how price gouging actually would work. This is why every law in the nation about price gouging, I mean, if it's not like they're all the laws are basically price gouging is illegal and they have some criteria for which they qualify that. But every single law in the nation on price gouging is immoral. And every single law on price gouging in the nation causes the problem to extend longer than it should have to. The economist, Milton Friedman, when he said price gougers deserve a medal, he's absolutely right. Even if their sole motivation is greed, even if they don't give damn about anybody but themselves and their wallet, they are still serving their fellow man by taking the time to get that supply up. And once that supply gets up, and the quicker it gets up, the quicker that shortage ends, the quicker that people have their needs met. And there's any variations that we can talk about this. This is, I think, probably the best way to explain it. It's just to walk people through it. It's a contrived example. And I know people could be like, well, what about this? What about this? But again, The same the same elements that I've placed into this contrived example apply no matter what. They always do. And the reality is, the example that I'm showing where supply needs to come up quickly because you've got a demand, you've got destruction and disaster, right? That's actually the same mechanism that's in play when there is no disaster. If I go to the store right now, if I get off this podcast and I go to the store right now and I say, you know what, I'd like to have some chicken for dinner tonight. And I get there and there's no chicken. Maybe for whatever reason, you know, maybe there was an accident at the local farm that they were sourcing from. And so a lot of chickens died. So they don't have any chicken. Right. Well, I go there and now the chicken's been bought up because they weren't able to keep up with the demand. They weren't able to keep buying chicken at their regular rate. And so now the chicken supplies have went down. So I go in there and I don't get to buy chicken. Well, some other farm might say, hey, we can source that. We can provide it to you for this short term. Or I'll give you even a better example. How many times, and I've actually had this happen. How many times have you seen a restaurant run out of food and run down to the local store and buy something because they need to keep that demand? Like, people want to meet the demand and they will go out of their way to meet the demand. This happens all the time. This contrived example is really not that contrived. It's only contrived in that I've narrowed it down and I've made some specifics to kind of illustrate the point. But it's really not so contrived because it's actually how things play out. And it's how they play out in good times or in bad times. And this is so when people laugh and say, oh, supply and demand are thrown out the window, they don't matter. No, they absolutely do matter. Because it's the same mechanism, it's only compressed. And so it feels different. Yeah, it feels different when I go to the store and I'm used to paying $1 for a bottle of water. It feels different if all of a sudden now I got to pay $4. But that doesn't mean that the mechanism that caused it to be $1 is any different than the mechanism that caused it to be $4. It's just a matter of the time has been compressed. And so, yeah, it feels different because it's what I'm used to. It also would feel different if I go in there and they have too much water and they're like, we got to get rid of this water. And they cut the price in half. And they said, all right, we normally would sell it for $1, but now we're going to sell it for 50 cents. Well, guess what? That feels different too. I'm excited. That's why we get excited about BOGOs. That's why when the flyer comes in the mail and we're like, BOGOs, get to the store. Got to go get this chicken. And we don't think twice about it. We don't think twice about this idea of why are they offering a BOGO? Why are they offering some deal? And why am I leaping to go get it? Because it feels different and I'm taking advantage of it. Am I the greedy one? Should there be a law against that? Should there be a law against people that take advantage of BOGOs? Because if there's a law that takes advantage of people that are price gouging because it's unfair, then we should also have one on the flip side. And that's why I say that everybody actually is already familiar with this mechanism. They already believe it. They just don't realize it because it hasn't been explained to them. So libertarians and liberty lovers alike, keep explaining it and keep finding new and novel ways to explain how this works. Because at the end of the day, people really do believe in supply and demand. They just don't realize it because, again, it does hit different. All right, folks, let's see here. What do we got? I got a couple more comments. Keith Garrett says, economics, rendering politics extraneous, one argument at a time. Absolutely. That's what it's going to take. One argument at a time, over and over and over again. But don't repeat yourself. Find new ways to describe it. And find ways that people can understand, that make sense to them. Now, maybe my example is not the greatest. Maybe my contrived example here wasn't the greatest. Maybe you can do better. And I implore you to do so. Think about the flaws in my argument, and I mean flaws in convincing people. Think about how that works out and then go make a better argument. And then somebody else can make a better argument on top of yours. And eventually, with any luck, we will bring people around to widely accept that this is a good thing, no matter how bad it feels. It's just as good when it feels bad to pay double for something as it's as good when it feels great to pay like half. And that happens. And it's not greed, or it is greed on our part. And if it's okay for us to be greedy, then it's okay for someone else to be greedy. All right, folks, thank you so much for watching. Hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. Let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. Last but not least, remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great weekend. Catch you Monday. But for now, I'm out.